everybody. It's so nice to have you here. Welcome to our graduate case study reviews. I am Dr. Rebecca Troy, owner and founder of Retrain the Dyslexic Brain. And today we're going to talk about Ray. Ray is 8 years old and she just did an absolutely incredible job in the program. She was here for 8 months. And she went from being 40% accurate in her phonological awareness to 100% accurate. She went from the first percentile to the 96th percentile on the wide range achievement test at week, and from the first percentile to the 93rd percentile in spelling.
Well, I'm glad to know that because you would
hold on a second.
There's actually all Medicare.
Sorry, I'm going to have to mute somebody here.
But anyway,
Gwendolyn, are you able to mute for whatever reason?
I changed digits, right? Because I was trying to get close to home.
Hang on, everybody. There we go. Thank you. I think that we should be okay now. So, massive changes in her scores from beginning to end. Again, this happened in a period of 8 months. So one of the amazing quotes that came from her mom was, she said, "This changed our life. It's the biggest understatement that we will ever have. We'll look back as parents and as husband and wife and just have complete confidence that this is one of the things that we got right." And I so resonate with her comment there, because I think as parents, we are constantly wondering, like, gosh, did I do it right? Are we making the right decisions? But she just said, like, this has been one of those decisions for them that really has made them feel super confident. So just wanted to clarify a couple of things so that you understand kind of how this whole system works. So everything that we are about to talk about is work that Kelly and Ray did in their home. So how we support families is we give the family the techniques to be able to do these things at home to help reorganize how the brain is connecting letters and sounds. And so we'll talk more about that and what that looks like in just a few moments. But just for context, I think it's really helpful for you to know that Ray and Kelly did all of this in their living room or at their kitchen table in just 10 to 15 minutes a day. And so for most children who go through the program, I would say that they do that in about 16 weeks. Ray took a little bit longer because she did have a pretty severe case. So they went through in 8 months. But we'll talk about this. It's still less than a school year that she had these massive changes. So just want you to have the context on that before we dive in. So it's always really important to me that everybody has a deep understanding of dyslexia before we get started. So I have on the screen an fMRI of 2 different brains, and I want to point out a couple of features that I think are really important. When you have a non-dyslexic person, neurotypical person, you can see that there is activity in this back part of the brain that we call the occipital lobe. This is where our vision is controlled. And then you can also see that over the ears in the parietal temporal lobe, we also have brain activity. But when you look at a person with dyslexia, you see an entirely different neurological profile when the person is performing a language task. So if we were to say, okay, read this word, spell this word, write this paragraph, this is what would happen in the brain of a dyslexic person. And I think that that's just such an important distinction, because that happens a lot where people believe that this is an effort thing. This child just isn't trying, or this is maybe maybe it's the curriculum. Like, I didn't teach the right curriculum. That's why it's not working. No, in fact, it's not working because the brain is actually not using these areas that a typical reader would when trying to interact with letters and sounds. And so this is why, if your child is reading a word and works really hard to decode it and sees the same word 2 lines later, they often don't remember what it is. Or they might have a really long word and maybe they get the first letter or two and the rest of it is just a guess. Again, that happens because the brain is not able to connect what they see and what they hear together. So it's this disconnect between letters and sounds in the brain. And so you can see the same thing this time in an EEG. Again, a typical reader having that neural activity, a reader with dyslexia really not. But this is the part that I think is the most important for you to know and understand. Brains are capable of change and they change all of the time. And so whether we are talking about, hey, we've had this terrible thing happen, someone has had a stroke, we've needed remediation, the brain can change. They've done studies of London cab drivers, people who have had to study maps of the city, and they found that even after a few weeks, the spatial orientation areas of their brain have changed and shifted. It is absolutely possible to help a person with dyslexia to start using the areas of the brain that were underdeveloped from the start. And so often those underdevelopments are genetic. Those things are heritable, highly heritable in families. So it's highly likely that if somebody in your family has dyslexia, somebody else down the line will too. But it's actually something that you can also obtain through environmental circumstances. So let's just say you were in a classroom or you were in a home environment that didn't really have literacy as a big part of what life looks like. It's possible that those things can not be developed through an environmental circumstance as well. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that. Super, super important because when we talk about everything that's happening, this is the result of helping the brain to reconnect letters and sounds. So let's talk about Kelly and Ray specifically. So Kelly is a homeschool mother of 5. She has 10 years of public education teaching experience, and she has been trained in the Orton-Gillingham method. So it was really, really hard for her. And if you want to listen directly to Kelly, she did a beautiful interview that we have posted on our YouTube channel that you can listen to this directly from Kelly. But she said, oh gosh, Dr. Trey, it was so heartbreaking because I had already raised other children. My son started reading at age 4 and Ray couldn't even learn the alphabet by age 8. So it was really difficult for her to have all of this background, all of this experience, and not feel like she was able to really move Ray forward. She said, despite all of the efforts and things that I did, nothing was really working. So we did all tactile curriculum and, probably tried that for a few weeks, wasn't working. Then we switched over to an all kinesthetic curriculum. And then we went to an all auditory curriculum and a visual curriculum and a combination of all of those things. And she said, gosh, we cycled through multiple curriculums every few months, always hoping that the next one would be the golden egg. And so even after completing a year of Explode the Code and their pre-primer program, Ray still wasn't retaining letters. So still, massively struggled to be able to remember them from one day to the next. She did say that Ray had some early warning signs of dyslexia. She never really recognized environmental print. So stop signs, brand logos, didn't really seem to be able to connect letters and sounds naturally. Kelly said, even things like, oh, there's Chick-fil-A, that starts with a C, or there's McDonald's, it starts with an M. She said Ray really just wasn't putting those things together. Often Ray flips entire words, cat became tack, talk became tick. She said there's often no logical reason why she would put letters and sounds together in the way that she did. So at age 8, Ray went in for a formal assessment, and Kelly really described this as being one of the formative memories that really shaped what happened next for her. She went to an evaluator, and the evaluator said Ray had, quote, the most severe case of dyslexia that she had ever seen. So she did get a diagnosis of both dyslexia and dysgraphia, and it was possible that dyscalculia would be predicted for the future. And the evaluator told Kelly, as a homeschool mom with 5 kids, you yourself are never going to overcome this. Too many other kids in the home. You're going to need to go to intensive 2 to 3 times a week therapy for years. Maybe if she's lucky, Ray will read by the time she's 15 years old. And so Kelly said it was like the bottom just completely dropped out. I'll never forget sitting in that lobby thinking, how is Ray not meant to be my daughter? Like, this happened for a reason. She's a very faith-filled woman. She said, God gave me this child for a reason. So like, what is it that I'm supposed to learn here? But it just felt really, really heartbreaking. She said, it was in that moment where I thought, I'm not going to be able to meet my child's needs. And as a mother, that just feels really terrible to know that you love this child so much, you want to do the best that you can for them, but I'm never going to be able to do it. She said, there just seemed to be no hope. I had tried every program. I had bought every curriculum. I'm OG certified. I've done all of that. But it just so happened that divine intervention happened, and she got a phone call that same day from one of her friends that had gone through this program with her son, really had amazing results. And she said, there's actually this thing that you don't know about, and you can actually reorganize the brain. You should check this out. So before she started with us, her assessments did confirm the severity of her challenges. She was below the first percentile in reading. She was only 40% accurate with that phonological awareness. And we do ask clients for a writing sample when they start. They were not able to provide one when they did their intake because Ray refused to write. She could draw pictures, but she couldn't write any words to accompany them. And Kelly said there were just a lot of hidden struggles, things that she didn't often realize were holding Ray back. So she avoided games that had anything to do with reading. She wouldn't play Yahtzee with the family because of the
You're
scoreboard.
being so good babysitting her for me.
Sorry, one second. I've just got to figure out where. Got it. Okay. So she would defer playing with the kids her age, and then she would instead choose to play with younger children because she could lead them and not choose reading as something that they would play. For years, oh gosh, sorry, I've got to mute somebody. Okay, I think I've got Bean. Thank you. She said for years, Ray struggled to articulate what she wanted. So Kelly called them Ray-isms, but she'd say, I want a waffle. But what she really meant is I want a pancake. She'd say, Mom, I want them little chickens instead of saying nuggets. So word finding for Ray was always very difficult. And that massively shifted too, which we'll talk about in a minute. But long story short, Ray had an incredibly difficult case, and I'm sure that this story resonates with so many of you. I think, gosh, if we were to poll the people that are here now, I'm sure many of you have been told, like, your child is not going to grow. They've got a really severe case. We've done the best that we can do. But what I think is really, really important to articulate is that Kelly wasn't okay with that. She wasn't willing to accept that this was as good as it was going to get, or that Ray might get there by the time she was 15. It was imperative to her that Ray had the ability to read. So some of the cool things that happened as she started to progress, she just started writing and nobody was asking her to. She was producing little books in the pews at church. Her letters were starting to appear in the correct order. So in those moments, it became very obvious to Kelly that something within these first few modules has switched in her brain. Of course, I didn't see it happening, Kelly said, because there's not writing yet, but just even in little things like her ability to want to write happened because she had reorganized how her brain was connecting letters and sounds. She started the program on May 5th and she completed in December, so it was 8 months total. Ray's goal for herself was to be able to read her birthday cards by her 9th birthday. Changes occurred rapidly, despite the evaluator predicting that she might only read by the age of 15. So Kelly really celebrated that as well, saying it was so gratifying for me to not have listened to the evaluator who said, like, you might get there, Kelly, by the time she's 15. In 8 months' time, she completely changed the trajectory of Ray's life because she's amazingly reading now. She said it's all training her brain. That's literally what the programming was. So during the initial assessment that she had with her evaluator, there were some things that I think are really gifts that are important to talk about. So kids with a dyslexic brain profile often have enhanced creativity, enhanced problem solving, enhanced spatial thinking, and that definitely was true for Ray. So there was a tangram puzzle that they had on the table and no instructions with how to put that together. And while Kelly was talking with the evaluator, Ray just put it back together without any kind of a reference pattern, which shows that, it's not that Ray wasn't really smart. Ray is really smart, and Ray had the ability to do so many other things with her brain. It was just this disconnect in how her brain was connecting letters and sounds. But she said we went from crying over schoolwork to our baby girl reading, and it's pretty fluent sometimes, and it's super fluent, and it was like it just happened. She wanted to be able to read her Bible because as a family, they do read every morning, and she couldn't read hers, and she can do that now. She does it every morning. And Kelly said, every morning, my husband and I look at each other and we're just amazed. Again, this is 8 months later, so it's a huge, huge shift inside of a year. She said it changed our life. It's the biggest understatement that we'll ever have. We look back on our life as husband and wife and just have complete confidence that this is one of the things that we got right. She grew over 5 standard deviations, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but there's just no words that can put into real meaning what it looks like when a child goes from below the first percentile to the 96th. For somebody that doesn't have dyslexia, you can't imagine how intricately dyslexia affects your life. And so in these moments, Kelly was really reflecting on all of the things that she didn't really realize that Ray shied away from: playing games with the family, interacting with kids her age, and that massively shifted as well. One of her celebrations on one of the calls was like, oh my gosh, we played a game with words where Ray had to read the instructions, and we were all of us playing as a family. And so often she just said it's those silent things that you don't really realize go alongside of this that she now gets to participate in, which is just amazing. Yeah, so one of the things that she also said is when you look at the time frame, she was working for 10 to 15 minutes every day with Ray. And I will be honest and say that not every day is sunshine and rainbows. Sometimes you don't want to do it. Sometimes your kiddo doesn't want to do it. Like there's a real struggle sometimes. But in looking at the alternative, she said, I was staring down the barrel of a 7-year window of biweekly, intensive, expensive therapy. She said to go from May to December and finish in 8 months, it's the best money we've ever spent because it changed her life. So in her reflection, I think the point that she was trying to make is, had we done this over a course of 7 years, I think the exponential time investment, financial investment would have been very, very significant. I did ask her if she had any advice for other families who are going through this. She said, don't accept limiting predictions. Where's the hope in that? So she did also mention to look for hidden struggles. Many behaviors that Kelly thought were just little Ray-isms were actually manifestations for dyslexia. And then she said, consider the investment. You can go to an in-person facility for 5, 6, 7, 8 years with no guaranteed results. She said, we did it. We spent our real money and we got real results in less than a year. We do it again in a heartbeat, especially after going through the program. I think now that the lights are on in the attic for my girl, her confidence in every area of her life is changing. She's reading Judy Blume books independently. She's discussing the content after. She's sitting on the back porch swing with a stack of readers, and she's doing that by choice. She's reading to her little sister Rose and saying, hey, Rose, do you want to come sit down and read a story? Which, again, you were not even able to write down any letters at all 8 months ago. To go from that to having the ability to read and write and enjoy it is just priceless. So pretty amazing. So let's dig into Ray's data. I want to show you exactly how amazing that this is from a statistical standpoint. So when we look at phonological awareness, this is something that we would expect to be mastered at the end of first grade. Once we get past that, if you still are unable to do these, you are, from a reading perspective, quote unquote, behind. So Ray really, really struggled with this. She only had 40% of this assessment correct. That really, at her age, she should have had about 100% of it correct. And so 8 months later, she did have 100% of it correct, but really helping her to overcome the challenges that she was having in her brain made a massive, massive difference on everything else. So we're going to talk about statistics for a minute. So I just want to help you to understand a little bit on educational statistics. This is the normal distribution curve with the 50th percentile being right in the middle. So this blue dot here represents the work of Dr. John Hattie. He's done meta-analyses, which are studies of studies. And what he did was find out, like, how much growing in a year does a kid typically do? And so this was his finding over and over again, that if you start first grade and you end first grade, you can expect to grow a 0.3 of a standard deviation. So a standard deviation is going from this line to this line, or this line to this line. So all kids, we could expect to grow this much in an entire academic year. So if your child is behind, you don't just want them to grow the average amount. You want them to grow more than that because they have some catching up to do. So if an intervention has moderate statistical significance, it's a 0.5 of growth. If it's statistically significant results, it's a 0.8, or almost all the way to a full standard deviation of growth. So this is really what you're shooting for, is to help the child to grow as much as humanly possible. So here's how that applied for Ray, which is why it's so, so cool. When we look at her starting percentiles, she was at the first percentile, which puts her here in this very low range. If she would have grown what is typical in an entire year, she would have gone to this yellow dot. If she would have made statistically significant progress, which is what we want, she would have made it to this brown dot. But Ray went 1, 2, 3, 4 standard deviations of growth in 8 months' time, which statistically is outstanding. So anytime, again, when you're thinking about interventions, how do I grow as much as humanly possible? You're trying to go as much as you possibly can to help the child to close the gap. So you'll notice that the picture in spelling is very, very similar. So she started at the first percentile. Again, she went to the 93rd percentile. So this would have been statistically significant growth. She went 1, 2, 3, 4 standard deviations of growth in spelling as well. So massive, massive improvement. That's data that we're super, super proud of. So I do want to celebrate Kelly throughout this process, because it would be a mistake to make it think like this is a magic wand that you just wave over the child and like, oh, poof, your brain is now different. This happened because Kelly maintained daily consistency with the program. Repetition does influence plasticity. And so it's only 10 to 15 minutes, but you do have to show up and do that consistently. And so Kelly did that. And that's part of the reason why these results look the way that they do. We can give a client all of the information, but if they don't do it and they don't implement it, you're not going to see the same results. Kelly also had a deep belief that neuroplasticity was possible and that she and her daughter would achieve that. She leaned into our coaching and support. She was on those calls celebrating. She made learning fun. She celebrated Ray's wins. And she was very coachable and resourceful throughout the process. But she said her confidence in every area of her life has changed as a result of doing that work. So it's well worth your time, I promise. So I think, one of the questions that we do get a lot is like, is this typical? Is this, just a Ray thing, or does this happen a lot? And so we do collect data on every single kiddo that comes through this program, and the average growth from kids that have gone through the program is a 1.7 standard deviations of growth. So if this is what happens in a whole year, this is what happens to clients that go through the program. So this is data we are really proud of, which tells you that what we're doing is working. So again, the foundation of what has to happen is the brain has to be able to connect letters and sounds together, and then you have to help the brain to reorganize, retrain how to read, how to spell once you get those foundations underway. But holy cow, did that happen for Ray in a really, really beautiful way. So if you want to dig more into any of the educational research, there is a citation down here that you can dig into if this is of interest to you. Sometimes people really want to know about those things. But I do want to talk about why it's so critical to close the gap, and why when you're looking for solutions or interventions for your dyslexic child, you want to think about, how do I move them as far as I can, as fast as I can? And it's because they're inevitably going to miss opportunities, whether that's like, hey, I don't get to take the classes that I want to take, or I have to skip recess, or I can't do fun things after school because now I'm going to tutoring. There are things that you are unable to do like a typical kid because you're doing work on this. And so if you're going to do work, you want the work to be meaningful and to actually make a difference. It does have impact on struggles that you have in your home with the child. It can impact future opportunities, and it also causes struggle for the entire household. I mean, I think sometimes people think that the only person that would struggle in that situation is the child with dyslexia. That whole family, anytime that it is time for reading, or it's time for schoolwork, or we got to get the backpack out, I mean, that can be anything from meltdown and tears to angry to shutdown. It's very, very difficult to support a child who really, really wants to do well and is unable to because their brain is not connecting. And so that dynamic is just hard on everybody. But when you close the gap and you're able to do that quickly, not only do you improve academic performance, but you increase self-esteem and confidence, which I would say is probably the greatest thing about doing this work, is that you get to see a kid who doesn't believe in themselves, who feels poorly about their academic abilities, now all of a sudden want to participate in things, start showing up differently to their family, to themselves, to the world. And I think that's the coolest part. Often there's better mental health, greater access to opportunities. So it's just super, super important. I will always advocate to do the work. It's not always easy, but I promise you that you will not regret doing the hard things now, so that later on in their life, they have the ability to choose and do whatever it is that they'd like. So a couple of different opportunities. If you are here on the call and you're like, I just need some help. I think we might be struggling with dyslexia, but I don't actually know for sure. So every couple of weeks, we just did one, so probably the next one won't be until March, but we do dyslexia discovery workshops all of the time. And those are, you come on for about an hour and to an hour and a half of learning, and you leave with 3 assessments in your hands that you can give to your child to figure out if this is something that's a struggle, a little bit, a lot of it, but having that data in your hands is really, really helpful, especially if maybe you can't afford to do a full neuropsych workup, or the wait list is 6+ months. It can be really, really nice to just have that data in your hands quickly. So if that's something that you need, just send us a message and our team would be happy to get in touch with you and invite you to come to one of our upcoming workshops. I think that data can be really, really helpful. And also, if you're somebody who's out there who either just learned that dyslexia is something going on for your kiddo, or you've been trying things just like Kelly, and gosh, we've done every curriculum that we can think of, we've done every tutoring opportunity that we know to do, and it's still not moving, feel free to contact us. We'd be happy to set you up with somebody on our team to just see if it's a fit, if what your child needs and what we do is a match. So just send us a message, let us know, and we'd be happy to set you up with that. So with that, I'm going to officially close out the case study. Okay, thanks so much, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for being here.